So, firstly, what is your specific role within Nestle?
So I head corporate affairs for Nestle. I look after things like government relations. I look after sustainability. I look after media relations, things like that, communications.
What drove Nestle to become more sustainable?
Because it's really, really obvious that we only have one planet. And it's really obvious that every single one of us need to be doing some things differently. Nestle's been on a sustainability journey for a long, long time. I've seen sustainability reporting that goes back many, many years, like well before I joined Nestle. But the climate just creates additional urgency around what we do. And so we're looking at every area of our business. We've committed that we're going to have zero net emissions by 2050. And that covers not just us, but our suppliers as well, so all the farms that supply us. But the other thing that for us as a food and beverage business is that we're really, really dependent on agriculture because farms are where our ingredients come from. And when you see what's happening in farming, whether it's as the climate changes, it's really obvious to us that it's important for us as humans, but it's also important for our business as well that we can address climate change and not just be sustainable, but how do we up it to do better? How can we play a part in making soils more resilient, in rebuilding soil, in building farms so that we actually take a regenerative approach to agriculture? So that's the direction that we're heading.
I think that's a really good direction to be heading in to help.
It's very exciting to be working on it, that's for sure. Yeah.
Is it Nestle likely to make all of their products more sustainable sooner rather than later?
So we've got timetables on absolutely, well, no, I won't say everything, but we have timetables that take us out for years on different aspects that we need to address because you can't, there are some things that you need to do in a stepwise order. So we have products that we will reach net zero emissions very, very soon, as in within months, and we have others that will take a few more years and others that will be further out again. But we're looking at all of our ingredients, we're looking at transport, we're looking at packaging, we're looking at our own operations, and we have timetables in place to make things happen right through different areas of the business. So it's going to affect every product, it's going to affect every site, it's going to affect everything.
Yeah, obviously, as you mentioned, climate change is a really dire threat that we're all facing and something that a lot of our generation is quite nervous about. And it's awesome that Nestle has become more sustainable. Is there a way to propel how fast you are making all the products more sustainable? Is there a way to make it quicker than the plans?
Right now, I feel on the inside that this is hurtling along at an enormous pace. But we certainly, and we're certainly on the road already and want to make things change as fast as we can. I can't answer for every corner of Nestle, obviously, in terms of what's happening in every country, but certainly in the part of Nestle that I cover, which is Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific, we're already talking to suppliers and working with suppliers, working with dairy farmers, for example, and grains farmers and so on, and looking at how can we plant trees, how can we change our packaging, a whole heap of different things that we can do.
Awesome. Well, that's really exciting.
No organisation exists in isolation, so we've got lots of interdependencies, which is why suppliers are really important and why farmers are really important, but also looking at how does waste work, because if we get waste working better, then that will also make a difference as well, whether that's food waste, whether that's waste from our factories, or also packaging waste as well. So how do we collaborate with others to try and lift everything?
Definitely. That's really awesome to hear. So you've told us in the past that the paper packaging for Smarties is from a sustainable source.
Yes.
And you said that you do have the certification by the Forest Stewardship Council.
Yes.
why isn't this in your packaging? And would it be worth putting the logo on your packaging so that people know it is certified?
So this is one of those tricky questions where branding comes into play, because it's actually not the only certified thing relating to Smarties. So when you look at Smarties, there's a few things there that are certified. There's palm oil in there, and the palm oil is certified. The packaging is FSC certified. The cocoa in there is also certified. We do a lot of work around how do we improve things for cocoa farmers. And sometimes we just make choices about what things we do and don't put on packaging. In the case of Smarties, we've prioritised the work that we do on cocoa because that's a work that affects the lives of so many people to such a great deal of depth and involves so many Nestle people in that over a long period of time, that is the thing that we choose to put a certification badge on.
Yeah, definitely. That clears some of that up. So thank you for that.
Is Nestle trying to convert to renewable energy in the near future?
Yes, we are. We're working towards, so globally, we're heading for a target of 100% renewable electricity by 2025. For me, in the area that I cover, that covers Papua New Guinea. We have a factory in Papua New Guinea. And it covers our operations in the Pacific. It covers New Zealand and Australia as well. We already use some renewable energy. Some of that renewable energy is through the grid. And we've got to be really careful because renewable electricity and renewable energy are not the same thing. But to use a couple of examples of where we use renewable energy, we have a factory that makes Nescafe coffee in Queensland. And what we do with that is Nescafe coffee has one ingredient, that's coffee. We buy one thing, coffee beans. And then those coffee beans are roasted and ground and the coffee is made from them. But at the end, we're left with waste, with leftover coffee beans. And so we actually use those coffee beans as an energy source for that factory. And they provide about 40% of the energy that's used in that particular factory. Our factory that makes Mila, which is on the New South Wales mid-north coast, we actually get waste from the timber industry near there. So all the sawdust and wood chips and all those little bits, and they also go to run that factory. And about 80% of the energy in that factory comes from that waste timber, from something that would otherwise be waste. At the end, we're left with ash. Once we've extracted the remaining energy there, and that ash goes to the soil industry and goes into soil mixes. So it's a really great way that we're just using waste to create things that would otherwise go to waste for energy as a renewable energy source.
Yeah, I think that's really great.
Okay, so the company Mars is investing $1 billion in trying to ensure chocolate supplies remain stable in the face of climate change, as it is said cocoa beans could become very difficult to grow by 2050. Has Nestle got a position on this problem?
Nestle's been working really hard to improve what's happening for farmers and what's happening in cocoa farming for quite a long time now. And that covers a few different areas. First of all, it covers farmer training. It covers making sure that farming is actually better. So training farmers, making sure they know how to get the most out of their cocoa, that they know how to fertilise, how to prune, all those kinds of things, so that we actually have better farming happening there. Another thing is to address social issues in cocoa. And so we were the first company to develop a child labour monitoring and remediation scheme, which specifically looks out for children who are at risk of child labour and tries to address that situation on an individual child-by-child basis. And there's that aspect of it. And also, how do we look at things like improving the social situation for women there as well? And the final part is the next part is how we actually create a better approach to farming as a whole. And that's through certification schemes, through working through co-ops. We also do things like making sure farmers have access to new cocoa trees, because a lot of them, the trees are really old. I was actually really fortunate that I been able to see the work that's done there, and it's quite extraordinary to see how farmers have doubled their yield or even more through doing some of the things that they're told. The other thing that we've been doing, particularly in the Ivory Coast, is working on reforestation. So it's not cocoa farming, but in areas near cocoa farming, people have gone and planted in native forests, and native forests are being degraded. So we're trying to improve those native forests with reforestation, with local forest species, to try and address some of that. So we're doing an awful lot of work in cocoa. That, if you look at if you look at any of our chocolate products, you'll see a little logo on there that says Nestle Cocoa Plan, and the Nestle Cocoa Plan pulls together all these different pieces that we're doing. Yeah.
It's awesome that you're doing so much. So I've got another question for you. Some people find it hard to trust big companies because history has taught us that they are only interested in making as much money as possible. Do you think that the mindset within companies can change so that not only money is a focus, but the overall impact of the product on the environment is as well?
I think every company should be looking at their environment, at their business impact in totality. So for us, we look at that through the lens of what impact does this have? What are we doing? What impact does it have on people? What impact does it have on the planet? And what impact does it have on communities? And it's really, really important that all those things come into play, because otherwise we don't have a business in the long term. And that is about how you actually build a sustainable business, by putting all the pieces together. One of the things about working for a company the size and scale of Nestle is we actually have tremendous capacity to do good and tremendous capacity to have an influence on others. And so part of what we have to ask ourselves is not just how do we help the farmers who make products that they sell to us, but what's the flow-on effect that might have on the community, to other farmers, for good or for bad. And so you need to look at broader impacts. And so I talked about, that was such a rush summary of the work that we're doing in cocoa, but that's work that has continued to grow and build each year, as we've seen in some areas things that have worked, things that haven't worked, and how do we adjust and develop and grow that work, because we're not just addressing environmental issues there, but we're trying to address social issues, and they don't have easy levers. There are no easy buttons for a lot of these things. Now, we individually don't have the scale to deal with everything in cocoa, but we know that other companies are doing work as well, and collectively over time that can make a difference. Likewise, when we do the work, some of the work that we're doing on packaging actually has a flow-on effect to others in the industry. And we've actually been really keen to talk to others in the industry about what we're doing, because we know that this is an area where we all need to move. And when we learn something, it's helpful to others if we pass that learning on. I appreciate, I'm the first person, as the person who's with responsibility for communication, I'm the first person to appreciate that working for a big company doesn't mean the headlines are always terrific, but I do see the actions behind that, and I can see that often we're just trying to deal with really complex problems, but I can see the progress that's being made and the change that's being made and the learning and how that's shared and passed on.
Do you think by having more of the certifications on your products and advertised more, maybe that could help change people's mindsets on the big companies?
You know, that's challenging. You'd think so, but it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, because like a big company comes with big responsibility, and we completely know that. And sometimes there's a couple of things. Sometimes people see what we do and they say it's not enough. I understand where that's coming from, and there's always, and that's why we're continually looking to build on what we're doing. But certification is only part of what we actually do. So if I look at, like I talked about the Nestle Cocoa Plan, we do have Rainforest Alliance certification on our packs, and that's important, but what we're actually doing is a lot more than just certification. The thing that can be really hard, though, is that some consumers don't necessarily choose on the basis of what's the most sustainable product. There's a lot of other things come into play. And so we want to reflect some of those things in our packaging as well.
Do you think as reports like the IPCC report and as more people are becoming aware of the dire threat that is climate change, that one of the priorities for consumers is becoming sustainability? Do you think that is now becoming?
So it definitely is, but the degree to which it actually transfers through to the choice they make when they're standing in the aisle with the supermarket trolley is not necessarily there. Certainly what's happened with COVID is clearly everybody's biggest concern, and in Australia right now I think possibly to a degree that it hasn't been before. And but in a sense all that has done has masked the biggest concern underneath that is climate change, and it should be, and we should have a sense of urgency about that, and we should want to change that. And so it feels like scratch the surface of COVID concern and you will find climate concern underneath there.
How do you think is best to influence other bigger companies to make the switch like Nestle has? How do you think we can get more companies on board?
One of the interesting things about being a big company is that we are often early movers on things, and then you tend to see smaller companies follow through. That's a very sweeping tendency. You get some companies, of course, that have sustainability baked into their DNA and they're early movers anyway, but you do get a mass that doesn't necessarily move. But over time, you see the floor lift. So we're trying to push the ceiling up, and you see the floor lift over time. And when big companies put big statements out there, it makes it clear to others that they need to move as well. Some of the work that we've been doing on plastic and packaging, we actually really want others to be involved because we can't do the change ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'll throw it back over to Mila for the next question.
With the Kit Kat packaging you showed before, do you think you could tell us a bit more about that?
Oh, I can talk about that for the rest of the day. The Kit Kat packaging that we did, and this goes to some of the work that we've been doing around not just changing our packaging. It's not enough to just change our packaging. So we want all our packaging to be reusable or recyclable by 2025, and we're working towards that. But if we make our packaging recyclable and you throw it in the gutter, what good did that do? Or if there's not strong recycling systems, then it really hasn't made a difference. And so we have to look more broadly at what are the recycling systems. And one of the things that we identified in Australia is that packaging, recycling for soft packaging, which is the flexible stuff that you can scrunch in your hand, like a Kit Kat wrapper, like a bread bag, like those products, that there is not robust recycling for them. You can take them back to store to the Red Cycle program, and that program is really, really good. But a lot of people don't like to take stuff back to store. And also for a variety of reasons, that program is not scalable, can't be scaled up big enough to meet the need. So what we did is we partnered with a company on a trial of curbside recycling of soft plastics. So what happens if you put your soft plastics into a bag? We had a specially designed bag for this, and then that bag goes into your recycling bin. Now I'm going to say, don't try this unless you live in the right area, because generally soft plastic in a recycling bin is a contaminant and makes recycling harder. But in the area that we're trialling it, those bags are being pulled out and being diverted from landfill and going off for other uses. So one of the things that we decided to do with our partners was to find another, to show that what's actually possible with this collected plastic. And there is advanced recycling technology exists, but it's not available at commercial scale in Australia. But there is recycling technology that exists that allows you to change plastic back to oil. Now, if you've got hard plastic, like a PET bottle, those clear bottles, or the HDPE ones like milk bottles, they can be easily recycled back to packaging for food. But flexible packaging can't be recycled back into food, into packaging that's safe to use for food, unless you turn it back into oil. So we worked with our partners with a demonstration plant on the New South Wales Central Coast to turn some of that collected plastic back into oil, and then to turn that oil back into a Kit Kat wrapper, which is that one there, which has recycled content in there. And that's the first time that's ever been done in Australia. We would absolutely love to see this happen at scale. And so we've been talking to government, but we can't do it as one company on our own. It took 9 companies to do that, to get that right round a circular loop. But for us to get that to scale, we can't do that on our own. There are 500 local governments in Australia, and they have lots of different approaches to waste collection. There's the companies that do their waste collection. State governments are involved as well, and the federal government is involved as well. So just because we decide we'd like it to happen doesn't make it happen. But by creating that wrapper, we were able to show everybody what's actually possible and start to consider, what do we need to do? Is this feasible to do this at scale, to collect soft plastic at scale, and to find new ways of processing it, so that hopefully we can have a better future for soft plastic that doesn't see it going to landfill and sees it have better options than those that we have now.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. You can reuse soft plastic again.
Yeah.
As long as you turn it back to oil. You can. There's actually recycling of soft plastic happening now, but it can't be reused for food. It can be used for things like park benches. Some of it can go into road base. It can also be used for like commercial shrink wrap. Things like that can be recycled, but not for food grade. And the other thing, of course, is we're not collecting it. In-store collection isn't enough. We need bigger, more scaled up collection.
I might throw it over to Tilly for the last question.
So does the Australian government help companies to become more sustainable and more climate sensitive?
It's been interesting to work with to talk to the government about what we've been doing on plastics in particular, because our federal government is right now the first that's had a minister with responsibility for waste. And I can see that they're working hard to try and make it easier. They've been doing things like putting grants in place to allow people to improve the recyclability of their products, to improve recycling infrastructure. The organisation that we worked with on the trial collection has been given an Australian government grant to develop up a scheme, to develop up a system for sorting soft plastics. Because right now, the place that your yellow bin goes to doesn't have the capacity to sort soft plastics. It uses different ways, different machines to sort everything else, but there isn't a system in there for soft plastics. So they've been given money to develop that scheme, to develop a system so that that can then be retrofitted into existing recovery facilities around the country. They've also put money, they've also given grants to various industries to develop industry-wide product stewardship schemes that encourage us to collect waste. So, for example, there's an industry-wide scheme. There is now an industry-wide scheme that's being developed to look at hard to recycle plastics, and the work that we're doing is feeding into that. But the funding has been provided to actually get that set up. So the federal government, you can see them pulling levers to try and help business get to where business needs to get to on some of these things.
That's really exciting. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with us. It was really awesome to get a little bit of more insight into Nestle as a company. It sounds like you guys are doing some amazing things.
We enjoyed the first video. Thank you.
No problem. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, bye.
Bye.